Long night, Arthur.
This is the Porsche 911 Experience. My name's Lindsay Porter.
My name's Dave Pollard. The Porsche 911 represents one man's thinking about what a real sports car should be.
In this video, we'll be looking at some of the 911's ancestry, and some of its interesting offspring, the magnificent sporting achievements of the 911, and some of the many model changes over the years.
We'll also be showing you how to buy a good 911 and how to put it right if you don't buy such a good one. We discuss with experts the maintenance needs of the 911 and how Britain's Porsche Club caters for the 911 enthusiast.
However, the 911 is a car that's made its reputation on the racetrack, so it's natural that we should start this video right there.
For many, the true essence of the 911 is summed up in the Porsche Owners Club Race Series for standard cars. Clearly, this means that the racing is much closer and that winning is more down to driver skill than any particular car. Supported in 1988 by Pirelli, the 911 drivers provide thrills and spills all season. One of the most spectacular races takes place at England's only street circuit, the Birmingham Super Prix. Nick Wenham waits for the green light.
Here they come, storming away from the start with Nick Wenham on the outside of the front row and poleman Mike Jordan, the men pulling away best. But it's Wenham who has the best of the advantage at the moment as they reach Molly Slip, the left-hander, for the first time. Wenham it is who leads as they go up towards the Pie chicane, that cheeky little right and left flick. The extra power of Wenham's turbo, of course, helping out. Jordan in second place. Keith Russell is third at present, with Tony John there in fourth place. There was a 10-second delay before the start of the Class B cars, and here they come into Molly Slip Corner for the first time, with John Morrison, Brian Robertson, Graham Leask and John Fletcher, the men at the head of the field there. But back with the Class A cars up at Halford's Corner. Wenham, the turbocharged car, giving him a tremendous advantage on that long uphill straight, is now finding that the non-turbocharged car of Mike Jordan snapping at his heels. Jordan pulls alongside as they go down Belgrave Middleway, but again the extra power of that turbo tells as they come up towards the right-hander at Ferodo Corner. As the Class B cars are approaching Halfords, you catch a glimpse of them in the right of the screen there. Here at Ferodo for the first time, it's a 10-lap race this. Nick Wenham's going to have to need all his guile for these 10 laps to keep Mike Jordan behind him, but he's succeeding in so doing at the moment. Wenham first.
The action looks good from the outside, but now let's take a ride with Porsche turbo driver Chris Millard as he sets the fastest lap of the race.
Chris Millard, he's He's the man who failed to start at the beginning of the race. His car was missing from the grid. Chris, a jeweller from Birmingham, a local man, was very keen to put on an impressive performance at his local circuit. Sadly, with mechanical problems which troubled him in practice yesterday, repeated themselves in the warm-up today, not managing to run at the head of the field, but running very quickly indeed in the Grafton Software Swinford Motors car. Through the right-hander at Ferodo he goes. Remember, this is the twin turbocharged Martini Porsche to the car of Nick Wenham that is lying in second place at the moment. These two teammates, also great friends, have managed to be part of the really happy scene that is the Pirelli Porsche Championship. Now he's going to be not so much lapping a slower car, but he's going to have to get himself past a slower car if he's going to make this a pretty quick lap, which it certainly looks as though it's going to be. Dives down the inside of that slower car as he gets to Zenith. Twitch of opposite lock there to keep the Porsche in a straight line, and a very polite wave to the man who pulled over and led him past as well. That's the sort of camaraderie we like to see in British club racing. Through the left-hand flickered shell, more opposite lock to correct the powerful Porsche turbo there, and along the Bristol Street straight, across the start and finish line, past the timekeeper's box, of course, the main commentary position. Back briefly with the leaders, but before we do so, there we see the fastest lap in the race so far, and that was the lap when we were in car with Chris Millard, a 1:48.37.
The 911 debuted in the 1965 Monte Carlo Rally, when two factory engineers won the GT class. Since then, the 911 has continued to be successful in the rally world, taking various championships, with the most successful 911 rally driver being Bjorn Valdegaard, who uses his fearsome modified 911 SC for the 1978 Safari Rally. When the 911 Carrera was introduced in 1973, it was soon being campaigned on race circuits all over the world, and this led to the RSR Turbo, the 934, and ultimately the 935 Turbo Group 5 racer, possibly the best known of the 911 circuit races. With this car, Porsche won the Manufacturers' Championship in 76, 77 and 78. With the last incarnation being the incredible Moby Dick, twin turbo producing no less than 750 brake horsepower. The incredible 959 is the latest sporting 911-based Porsche, although this is covered in some detail later on. From the first Monte Carlo Rally winner in '65 to the 935 Moby Dick to the 961, the Le Mans racing version of the 959, the development and progress of the 911 in motorsport has been relentless. As we've already seen, there's plenty of enthusiasm for racing 911s today. Nick Wenham has been racing turbos for many years, and for 1989 has chosen to drive the top-of-the-range SE Turbo, with its distinctive flat nose and extra 30 brake horsepower. Lindsay spoke to him at Donington.
Perhaps you tell us about your car, Nick, and tell us what's involved in going Porsche 911 racing.
Well, it's a 911 Turbo SE, basically built from a 3.3 standard turbo. Today in the showrooms, of course, those are changing hands for £150,000 a piece, and this was obviously a less expensive way of doing it. I think that if you race in Class A, you've really now got to look at producing a budget of £30,000–40,000 a year, which is a lot, and in most cases this means getting outside sponsorship. But you've got an interesting profile with the Porsche drivers in that they tend to be mostly businessmen. And although in the past, when it was less expensive, they used to do it themselves, they're applying their business acumen to obtaining sponsorship because it's a good marketing opportunity. The absolute minimum that you need to go Porsche racing now, fortunately, are mostly safety items, like you must have a full racing seat, you must have a full harness, and of course a full cage in the car. It's very, very important. And other items that you do are brake cooling, which again is very important. And again, most of these modifications are sensible ones. They don't actually make you go any faster, but they keep you on the road longer. But that's really where it just begins.
The legend of Porsche has been a long time in the making and started many years ago. In 1875, to be precise, when Ferdinand Porsche was born in Bohemia. After designing cars for Daimler and Mercedes, he started his own technical design studio, where his first project was this 6-cylinder car for the Wanderer Car Company. From this followed a commission to design and build the V16-engined Auto Union Grand Prix car and the less spectacular but phenomenally successful Volkswagen Beetle. These 1937 prototypes all feature rear-mounted air-cooled boxer engines and his patented torsion bar suspension. The first road-going car to bear the Porsche name was the 356, which had a hand-built alloy body surrounding purely VW Beetle components, including the rear-mounted engine and gearbox. The 356 model entered full production in 1950, manufactured initially by Reuters.
Not all the cars were British, however, and struggling through technical terms in German was but one of the scrutineer's problems. This Porsche car, though beautifully prepared, had apparently suffered some damage to the paintwork, and the owner points this out in order that an entry can be made in the logbook, for damage observed at the end and not noted at the start meant loss of marks. Yes, the sting in the tail, 1100 cc's of concentrated power.
By 1965, more than 75,000 356 models had been made. However, by the early 60s a replacement was required, and in 1963 the Frankfurt Motor Show was chosen for the debut of its successor, the Porsche Type Number 901, designed by Ferdinand Buzzi Porsche. By the time of its public launch at the end of 1964, the number had been changed as the French car company Peugeot insisted that they had the copyright on all car numbers with 0 in the middle. So, the 911 was born. Compared with the 356, it was a much cleaner design with more luggage space and more than 50% extra glass area. The rear-mounted power plant remained a flat, air-cooled configuration, but with 6 rather than 4 cylinders, as in its predecessor. Steve Robinson owns this superb short-wheelbase 911, filmed at the Porsche Club's annual concourse event. The power output was 130 brake horsepower from the 2-litre engine, a figure that would be acceptable even today. A 0 to 60 time of 8.6 seconds was quoted, with a maximum speed of 131 miles per hour. Despite many and various updates and modifications, the 911 retained the 2-litre power plant until 1969. But in 1965, the company became concerned about the large price differential between the outgoing 356 model and the 911. Hence the cheaper 912 was produced from 1965 to 68, and also for an extra year in America in 1975. The first 911 power uprate came in the 1967 model year, with the advent of the powerful but peaky 160 brake horsepower 911S. The car, which was the first to wear the attractive and expensive Fuchs alloy wheels. One of the most important 911 changes came in 1968, when the wheelbase was lengthened by just over 2¼ inches in order to improve the handling. Note that with the longer wheelbase, the torsion bar adjustment covers are covered somewhat by the body rubbing strip. The chase for more power continued, and after fitting fuel injection, Porsche increased the capacity of all engines to 2.2 litres in 1969, and further still to 2.4 litres in 1972, when the most powerful engine produced 190 brake horsepower. However, it was the following year that Porsche were to produce one of the most widely sought-after road-going 911s ever, the Carrera. Whilst all 911s show their racing heritage, the Carrera was virtually a road-legal, full-blooded racing car. With the Carrera, Porsche revived a previous policy of naming the fastest car in the model range after the famous Spanish Pan American race, first won by the company in 1954. Andrew Kenyon is a member of the Porsche Club GB and runs the Carrera register for them. He now takes up the story.
At the end of 1972, the factory had ceased the 917 racing program because that car had effectively been outlawed by the regulations, and were looking to develop the 911 road car for racing use. By homologating 500 of the Carrera RS cars, they wanted to achieve certain objectives, like, for instance, reducing the weight of the vehicle, producing a body profile that would be suitable for a racing car so they could put flared arches over wider wheels, and put aerodynamic aids on the car, such as the front and rear spoilers, to reduce uplift when the vehicle was travelling at a projected 150 odd miles an hour. The result of that was the Carrera RS car that we see now. The original batch were all produced as total lightweight cars with no rear seats, minimal creature comforts inside, even to the extent of removing the body undersealing and things like this, so that it was an absolute bare weight vehicle, basically. A lot of these cars that were produced, they thought they might have difficulty in selling, so were offered with the trim of a 911S car, which meant that it had electric windows, body trimmings on it, occasional rear seats, carpets on the floor, glove boxes and clocks, similar sort of things like that. And the vast majority of the Carreras that were produced and sold were in fact in this touring form. Yeah, the sales of the original batch of 500 exceeded everybody's expectations, I think, at the factory, and a further batch of 500 were produced, and in total probably slightly over 1,000 of the true RS Carreras were made. All of these can be identified by the 2.7 litre mechanical injection engines that were fitted to them. It's fair to say that all Porsche cars are really drivers' enthusiast cars. You can only really appreciate the true qualities of either a Carrera RS or any other Porsche by actually driving it.
Maintaining a Porsche 911 is no easy task, and you should attempt very little yourself unless you're suitably experienced. In this section, we'll be using some of the wide range of engine oils, greases and general lubricants available from our sponsors Castrol. To see how the DIY owner fares with a 911, we visit Porsche specialists Auto Farm of Tring to see just where to start. Checking the oil level is not difficult, but as the 911 has a dry sump system, it must be performed with the engine running and the oil hot. Topping up, should it be necessary, is made much easier by the use of a funnel. The brake fluid reservoir sits in the front boot compartment, where the fluid level can easily be checked and topped up as required. Whilst you're under the bonnet, you can make your check on the battery acid level, adding distilled water if necessary. Being an air-cooled car, there's no radiator or water system to cope with, but the 911 fan belt requires more attention than that of most cars. Access is simple, and the free play should be around 1/4 inch. Adjusting the tension is achieved by using shims, which requires pulley removal, using the special tools which should be in the standard Porsche toolkit. A broken belt could easily result in a badly damaged engine, so experienced drivers always carry a spare. Checking the spark plugs on a 911 is not easy, and the access has become more difficult with successive models. It is not something to attempt with a hot engine or without the special plug spanner. Points adjustment is not difficult, although cars manufactured after 1978 have all been fitted with contactless ignition systems, which can retain massive electrical charges and should be left well alone by the amateur. Carburation was phased out throughout the model range in the early 70s, and adjustment requires skill and the right equipment if the balance is to be correct. The Weber carburetors here are feeding an Auto Farm 3.5 litre special, producing no less than 300 brake horsepower. So far, the 911 has had 3 fuel injection systems. Like all of them, this mechanical system is incredibly complex and best left to the professionals. Any Porsche engineer will tell you that 911 engine work, including tappet adjustment for the 3.3 turbo and clutch replacement, requires engine removal. It's simpler than in many vehicles, but it still points to the DIY owner needing to have a well-equipped garage and lots of time. Naturally, all 911s require plenty of thorough attention to the brakes. The 911 has always had discs all round, although the size and capabilities have increased over the years. These front pads are obviously well worn. Bearing in mind the incredible performance capabilities of these cars, we would recommend that if you have even the slightest doubts as to your competence when it comes to the braking system, you really should take the car to an expert. Now we come to the turbo cars. Everything we have said so far about the normally aspirated models applies here, but doubly so. It's a brave or foolish owner who tangles with the complexities of the turbocharged motor, although the brake and battery fluids can be checked and topped up in much the same way. When it comes to lubrication, such a high-performance engine demands high-performance oil to cope with the incredible temperatures generated. Castrol Syntron X is specially formulated for such extremes and will keep everything running sweetly. The sheer performance capability of the 911 Turbo prompts us to advise that you should always seek specialist advice, and if you have any queries about the lubrication of your 911, whatever the model, then you can always contact the Castrol Customer Services Department at the address shown at the end of this video.
Now we're going to take a detailed look at the Porsche model number 930, the turbocharged 911.
There are few more potent cars than the 3.3 Turbo, its widely flared arches becoming synonymous with power, speed and excitement. The Turbo was first shown to a suitably awed public at the Paris show in 1974. The heart of the matter was the engine, the flat air-cooled 6 developed from the Le Mans cars. In the 1978 model year, the power output was raised to 300 brake horsepower by means of increasing the capacity to 3.3 litres and adding an intercooler, all of which meant that the engine had become even more complex. Nevertheless, as the 80s drew to a close, Porsche had raised the ante once more with a rather special turbo-powered 911. At the very top of the turbo tree is a rare and very expensive turbo special equipment model. This stylishly aggressive supercar is one of the top attractions from the 240 cars housed at the Patrick Collection in Birmingham. The car has 935 style front section with front wing air vents and retractable headlamps. The body adornments continue with full-length door sill panels and rear wing air ducts which direct extra cooling air to the rear brakes.
The large and aerodynamic rear spoiler directs air to the 3.3 litre turbo engine, which in SE form produces an incredible 330 brake horsepower.
This is transmitted to the tarmac by ultra-low-profile 45 series tyres on 9-inch wheels with the aid of a limited slip differential. The Turbo SE is rarer than many cars on the road, but the Patrick Collection has a much rarer 911 than this, which we'll be looking at a bit later. Meanwhile, if we've fired your enthusiasm for the 911, you won't be surprised to find that there is an equally enthusiastic and thriving club for Porsche owners and enthusiasts. Their annual concourse event attracts thousands, some who come to display their cars, others just to look and dream. The club itself was originally thought of back in September 1961, when Autosport carried this letter proposing the formation of a club for Porsche owners. The issue that appeared on the 29th of September announced that such a club had indeed been formed. At the end of 1961, the club had 51 members. By 1989, that number had grown to more than 8,000. Almost 30 years on, the club is now a limited company with its own premises in Northleach, Gloucestershire, and is the second largest Porsche club in the world, only the USA having more members. From this busy office, the business of club organisation can be controlled, whether it be a simple membership query to organising a national or even international event. Chris Branston has been chairman of the club since 1978. How does he see the function of the club and what can it offer to its members?
The rationale of the Porsche Club, like any other one-make car club, is to bring together enthusiasts of one particular marque, in this case Porsche. We try to cater for owners of all models over the years, from the early 356s to the latest water-cooled models. We also encourage active participation by enthusiasts who are perhaps not fortunate enough to own a Porsche, although our rules in fact limit this to 10% of our membership.
The club member can expect preferential insurance rates, which can often recoup the annual subscription in itself. The club produces a quarterly newsletter, and in between these, all members receive the impressive Porsche Post magazine. For the 911 DIY enthusiast, one of the major benefits of club membership is access to special tools and manuals. Naturally, there is a comprehensive technical help service. Members are justifiably proud of their membership and can choose from a wide variety of club products, such as sweatshirts, keys, fobs, watches and cufflinks. The club can also help with the purchase of a car, a subject we'll be covering after we've brought you right up to date with the 911's evolution. The 1973-74 model year saw Porsche once again increasing the capacity of all normally aspirated 911s, this time to 2.7 litres, and by 1977 the 250,000th Porsche was produced. A 911, of course. In the 1978 model year, the 911 had yet another capacity increase to 3 litres. By this time, the car had become very different to the 1965 original, with flared arches and front and rear spoilers becoming the norm. The final capacity increase on two-wheel drive models to 3.2 litres came in 1984. Porsche has always been well aware of the benefit of having open-air sports cars. As long ago as 1950, the 356 model was available in a cabrio version, and Targa versions of the 911 were available from as early as 1967. But it was not until 1982 that the lid was totally lifted. The original cars were badged as the 911 SC and used the 3-litre engine available at the time. Compared with the first 911s, later cars are longer, wider and much more curvaceous. In essence, the cabrio is representative of the design and layout of all non-turbo 911s. It now sports massive, low-profile tyres, which have played a major part in improving the 911's handling. The wheel arches have also grown. The engine is still air-cooled, of course, but has now grown by more than 50% to 3.2 litres and produces a heady 231 brake horsepower. Inside, the basic 60s feel remains. However, there are notable improvements. The seats have electronic adjustment as standard, and if you wish, seat heating is available as an option. Central locking too is standard, and the windows are electronically controlled. As is the soft top, which will not raise or lower whilst the car is on the move. And, as with any 911, it is when the car is in motion that it's at its best, as Lindsay found out from cabrio owner Nigel Edwards.
Right, so what's the appeal of the 911 Cabriolet for you, Nigel?
I think, as far as I'm concerned, I've had 6 911s, and I've had 4 coupes, a Targa, and this was the sort of natural next car to get. Obviously, in this sort of weather, it's absolutely ideal, and I use it for fun motoring, which, of course, this is what it's all about.
Yeah. Yes. Is it hard work erecting and lowering the hood?
No, no. I mean, the latest models have power hoods, but this is an 85 one, which didn't have a power hood as an extra, and it's a 30-second job. 30-second job.
What about the traditional disadvantages of the convertible? The wind, the noise and the rain, that sort of thing?
I think you wouldn't buy one if you were very worried about your hair getting blown about or anything like that. The beauty is that when the weather is bad, you can put the hood up and you can go along at 100 miles an hour, and it's as good as a coupe. You wouldn't know. It's a brilliantly designed hood, and it's so taut that there's no wind noise, and it's as quiet as a coupe.
You obviously enjoy driving the car, so what's the appeal of the 911 in general for you?
They're so reliable. You can leave them for 2 months and start them up. It's a fabulous engine. Never ever had anything wrong with the 911. They'll take all sorts of motoring, whether you're doing 140 along an autobahn or you're in the middle of London. They're just so docile, and yet you can get 26, 27 miles to the gallon. Fabulous machine.
So now we've looked at many and various 911s and their history, and perhaps we've whetted your appetite. Unlike many classic cars, it's still possible to buy a new 911. However, prices are far from cheap, and you'll probably be thinking more of a used model. We went to Porsche dealer, Chariots of Oxford, and to Porsche specialists Auto Farm of Tring to see both sides of the coin. Chariots of Oxford is typical of the 36 official Porsche centres in the UK. Despite having its origins in the 1940s, the 911 sits surprisingly at ease in the plush showroom alongside its water-cooled front-engined brothers. At present, the 911 is available in a choice of coupe, targa and cabrio body styles, with sport and non-sport equipment, and with a choice of turbocharged or normally aspirated engines. This particular car is rather special. It's the Carrera Club Sport, a lightweight 911 designed purely for performance. Several items of luxury equipment standard on the normal 911 have been deleted in order to save weight. These include the electric windows and sunroof, rear wiper, rear seats, and even the passenger sun visor. The standard 3.2-litre motor revs slightly harder, and the car is also fitted with a limited slip differential and ultra-low profile tyres. It's true to say that most purchasers of new 911s have achieved enough success to enable them to indulge their passion for one of the greatest sports cars ever made. All new 911s come well equipped with a tool case, tyre pressure gauge, air compressor for the spare tyre, and at Chariots there's also a Porsche car care kit. Other neat touches are the plastic bag to stow the standard wheel in should a puncture occur, and gloves to lift it with. Buying new has many advantages, not least the mechanical and body warranties, but demands an almost open-ended checkbook. So what's it like buying a used 911? Over to Lindsay at Auto Farm.
Buying a used 911 is not a task for the amateur. The car's complex, it's mechanically unconventional, and if you get it wrong you could end up spending an awful lot of money and end up with a car that's unsafe. The great thing to remember is that prior to 1975, cars like this one were built without the benefit of zinc plating, which later cars had. So, when you're looking for a 911, go for a later than 1975 car if you can, and get the benefits of a car whose bodywork will last for a very long time indeed. A few years ago, I came here to Auto Farm in connection with the book which I co-authored on what to look for when buying and how to go about restoring a Porsche 911. So it's only natural that I should come back here now to take the opinion of Josh Sadler, Managing Director of Auto Farm, Porsche racer and Porsche enthusiast extraordinaire, on what to look for when buying a used 911.
See, there would be 911 owner. He's got an enormous range of models to choose from. After all, it's been in production since 1965, and it's a very high-performance car. You've got to be very careful when you're looking at a second-hand one to make sure that the car is up to condition to cope with the performance it's capable of. So pre-76 cars are obviously showing their age by now, and therefore the most important area you've got to check is the bodywork and the underside of the car for corrosion. We could start off by looking at the front wing, where we get problems with the, in particular, the mud collecting around the headlight bowl and around the side light unit and causing corrosion coming through. Further back on the front wing, particularly around the fuel filler bowl on the near side of the car, again we've got a mud collection area, so we get a corrosion problem coming through in that area. One of the most rust-prone areas on the 911s is the sill area. Of course, it's got the heater tube running through it, and therefore it sees a lot of temperature change. And the sills you must look at carefully. Then along the top edge of the rear wing, underneath the rear window, whether it be Targa or Coupe, you get signs of corrosion there, which are very hard to deal with, especially on Targas. And the rear of the rear wing, where the rear light body is, again you've got mud collecting on the top of the rear light body. It can cause corrosion problems there too. And the door shells haven't really changed since the car came into being, and by and large they're quite good, but the surrounding edge of them has got a seam which, once corrosion gets into that, there's very little you can do, and there aren't any outer skins you can repair them with. Obviously these are fairly simple external inspections that you can carry out. It's as or more important to do a thorough inspection of the underside of the car, which is obviously something that's very difficult to do without the facilities that we've got here, and obviously something you've got to take some care over from the safety point of view.
In a few moments, Auto Farm's workshop manager Mike's going to show you how to look underneath this car using a hoist. You won't have the benefit of a hoist at home, so you'll have to use DIY means. Whatever you do, don't go underneath a car only supported on the manufacturer's jack. This is meant for wheel changing only, and to go underneath a car supported by a jack can be very dangerous practice indeed. Only go underneath a car supported by either a pair of axle stands or a very good quality pair of ramps. Now, when you're underneath the car, you'll need to protect your eyes, and if there are a lot of jagged edges about, you'll need to protect your hands with a pair of stout gloves as well.
The 911 engine they're all capable of doing 100,000 miles or more, assuming proper maintenance and use. And when you look in the engine bay, this will always be indicative of how well the car's been looked after and treated, because the engine bay is sealed from road dirt, so it's only going to get in a mess if the car's been abused in some way. All 911s are a little bit prone to blowing a puff of smoke on start-up, and this isn't anything in itself to worry about. Horizontally opposed engine with air cooling, so the oil does tend to get into the cylinders a bit more readily when the engine's turned off. But you do want to be careful of cars that are consistent smokers, because they are prone to valve guide wear, being an air-cooled engine, then a bit more temperature in that area. And this would be, a lot of oil smoke would be indicative of wear in that area.
It is unlikely that a post-1976 911 will need complete restoration yet, unless it has been badly accident damaged. However, putting a 911 back to its original condition is no easy task. The name Porsche is synonymous with high-quality engineering, and companies offering this level of expertise are few and far between.
WNL is one of a handful of companies who specialise in putting 911s back to their original pristine condition, like this superbly restored American 911T. For some of this section, we'll be showing pictures from Lindsay Porter's Haynes publication, Guide to Purchase and DIY Restoration of a 911. Essential Porsche reading, even if you don't intend to complete a full restoration project on your car. Although the galvanizing process is very successful, cars from the early 70s were rust-proofed by using PVC sealant, which tended to crack and allow moisture to penetrate and rot the metal. These are the most common rust areas on pre-zinc coated models, although cars with all of these would have to have a high rarity value to make them worthwhile restoring. Behind the bumper, the rear valance is prone to corrosion. If found to be rotten, it can be replaced with a purpose-made panel. Front wings can rust in several areas, but that's not a major problem, as they're simple bolt-on components and can be replaced easily. But that isn't the whole story. There's also an inner wing panel, and if the wing itself is corroded, then replacement of the inner wing will almost certainly be required as well. not an area for the amateur. The hollow sills which run along the sides of the car attract moisture and condensation and are often the first areas to rot. The jacking points too are likely to be suspect, as rotten metal here could be very dangerous should the car give way whilst being jacked up. In this particular case, it's so bad that complete renewal is necessary. The pneumatic chisel makes short work of this task. Even something relatively simple, like sill removal, shows how much easier it is for the professional with experience and the right tools. With the outer sill removed, it's no surprise to find that the inner sill is in similar condition. The only answer in this case is to weld in completely new panels. WNL recommend official galvanized Porsche body panels for all repairs and restoration work. Note that for this operation, the operator is using TIG welding equipment. If you're going as far as to restore the car's bodywork, you might want to retrim the seats as well. Originally covered in tartan cloth, this late 70s 911 seat has been modified using two-tone leather. This one is from a 1966 911T, retrimmed to original specification and now as good as new. They're at present out of the car as the owner wanted a complete respray, from green to silver. In order to ensure a high standard of finish, preparation has to be meticulous. Careful work is required to ensure that even the smallest of imperfections are filled in. Then, many hours are spent flatting down the surface with progressively finer grades of wet or dry. The car is given many coats of primer. When this has been applied and the surface is passed as being perfect, the final two-pack top coat completes the job. All this should only be carried out whilst the operative has the protection of air-fed breathing equipment. This engine and gearbox unit has been completely renovated for the 1966 car we've just been looking at. Until recently, the timing chain tensioner was prone to failure. It has to be replaced with the later, more reliable version, as its failure could lead to engine damage costing thousands of pounds. The same is true for the small but expensive auxiliary drive, which controls the oil pump and timing. If it fails, the consequences could be disastrous. Factory heat exchangers are very expensive, but don't cut corners here because poisonous gases could get into the car through the heating system. Driving with faulty heat exchangers could be fatal.
With the prices of new 911s going through the roof, more and more drivers are wanting to experience the ultimate Porsche but cannot afford to buy new or almost new. Despite the cost involved, many owners prefer the simpler classic profile of the earlier models, before spoilers, wide wheel arches and black trim became the vogue. So that's it. If you want something a little different, or if your present 911 is getting past its best, restoration could be the answer.
So, now we've seen the past and the present of this incredible sports car. But what of the future? First seen at the Frankfurt show in 1983 as a Group B study, Porsche's 959 featured many futuristic ideas, many of which related to the incredible twin-turbo 450 brake horsepower 2.8-litre engine. Porsche decided that the best way to prove this incredible car, with its mass of high-tech electronics and mechanical components, was in competition. And nowhere has it ever been more competitive than in the Paris-Dakar raid. Instigated by Frenchman Thierry Sabine, the raid is a 12,000-kilometre race across the Sahara, the world's largest and potentially most dangerous desert. Porsche originally tried out their four-wheel drive system in 1984 with a team of 3 specially converted 911s, and it was René Mege who took the victory in that year. In 1985, 3 prototype 959s were entered, although by the second day, all 3 were suffering from suspension problems. However, it was not to be a fairy tale debut, for Mas rolled his car before they had left Algeria and Jackie Ickx hit a rock and had to retire. For the 1986 event, the 3-car Porsche team was the same as in 1984, and although the pace was quicker, by the time the cars reached Tenerife, Medj and Ickx were first and second. Not unnaturally, the turbocharged 959s were quickest over the desert sections. Medj won the event, with Ickx second and Kussmaul sixth, a tremendous achievement, especially as only 80 out of the original 500 cars finished. Motor racing rules dictated that at least 200 road-going cars had to be built, and so tracking one down is not easy. At present, there's only 12 959s in the UK, one of which is part of the Patrick collection in Birmingham, and although their silver metallic example is still instantly recognisable as a 911 derivative, the differences are enormous. The power output of 450 brake horsepower is produced by fitting the car with not 1, but 2 turbochargers. For the technically minded, that's a staggering 340 brake horsepower per tonne. At engine speeds of up to 4,500 revs per minute, only 1 turbo is operating, making the car perform much as the normal 911 turbo. However, at this point, the second unit is brought into play, and the performance enters the realms of the racing car. Naturally, all this power and torque demands much of the brakes, wheels and tyres. Inside the car, the driver can select a different type of four-wheel drive application depending on conditions: dry, wet, snow, or really difficult. He can also select one of the 3 ride heights, from a sporting 4.7 inches to a cross-country 7 inches. However, once the speed reaches 95 miles per hour, the car will automatically revert to the lowest setting. The interior is typically 911, although the pedal positions have been improved, with the clutch operating an electronically controlled 6-speed gearbox, and the brakes, of course, being of the anti-lock variety.
Should you feel that a 959 will suit your style of motoring, you may be in for disappointment. Finding one is hard enough, but with an asking price approaching £500,000, it's destined to stay in the hands of the fortunate few. So where does the 911 go from here? Who better to ask than Managing Director of Porsche Cars Great Britain Limited, Peter Bulbeck.
Clearly the 959 contains a lot of futuristic technology, but it's technology which it is difficult to put into series production. To Porsche, series production means a volume of, let's say, 50 units a day. The 959 was produced at a rate of about 2 units a day. It's true to say, therefore, that a lot of lessons were learned from the 959, and a lot of those lessons can now be applied in a more volume production car, but with, let's say, toned-down technology. For many years now, we have sent a detailed questionnaire to all new car buyers, and we have what marketeers would perceive as a phenomenally high response rate to that questionnaire. It therefore gives us a very great depth of knowledge about our customer, his wants and his needs. Typically, he is the boss, the owner of a small business with, these days, actually less than 25 employees. He is therefore the sole decision maker in the business, and I guess the luxury of a 911 is a part of that decision-making process about what he wants out of his life. The reason he buys the car is, strangely, comes over very strongly as not anything to do with the image other people have of a Porsche and a Porsche owner. Let me quote to you from the actual research. The main reasons for purchase are the quality, the performance, the reliability, and the resale value of the car. Now, I don't think any of those have anything to do with satisfying anything than the person's own ambitions. That's what a Porsche is all about. It's a very personal possession, and it satisfies very personal aspirations. Interestingly, and probably coincidentally with the introduction a few years ago now of the 911 Cabriolet model, the 911 has attracted more and more lady buyers. Now some 17% of the total purchasers of 911s are actually ladies. Quite a conquest, I feel, with such a male image car. Again, the reason for that demand is simply the fact that the 911 is a very raw experience. It is a very sophisticated piece of machinery, but the driving experience of it is very much back to basics. There are other very small manufacturers who produce cars with that same degree of raw excitement, but of course not with the additional built-in civilization of a 911. Yes, it has perceived competitors, but if you ask a Porsche 911 owner whether there's any competition, I doubt whether he could think of any. My own view would be it'll certainly go into the 21st century. Whether it genuinely has 25 years still of development and customer satisfaction in it, that's another question, but I would say certainly into the 21st century, yes.
So, as we have heard, Porsche has once again put its competition experience to good use, and the mighty 959 has an impressive new offspring, the Carrera 4. Back to Dave for an overview.
And this is the Porsche type number 964, the Carrera 4, developed from the highly impressive 959. It cuts down on aerodynamic drag considerably with a CD factor of only 0.32. The four-wheel drive system is a simplified version of that used in the 959, although the complex clutch mechanism means that in some situations it is possible for the car to be driving only two of the four wheels. In order to keep the car stable at speed, there's an aerodynamic rear spoiler which extends at speeds of 50 miles an hour or more and retracts automatically at speeds of 6 miles an hour or less. For the driver's benefit, Porsche had brought the car right up to date, with more modern pedal angles, a new gear selector system and power steering. The value of aerodynamics is proved quite conclusively, as the top speed of the Carrera 4 equals that of the 300 brake horsepower turbo. And so Porsche are confident that the future of the 911 is assured, and that the Carrera 4 marks the beginning of a new era in this incredible story.
A story that began with one man's belief that there would always be demand for a thoroughbred sports car. A car that has confounded many simply by being consistently in demand, long after its 60s contemporaries have been consigned to museums. A car that has become the true epitome of the sports car, deriving many of its technical innovations directly from the race circuits of the world. A car which constantly raises the levels of performance against which other sports cars are judged. And so Porsche looks forward confidently to the future of making exciting sports cars, but for many there is nothing to match the 911 experience.
We hope that this video has given you some idea of what's meant by the Porsche 911 experience. One man's dream of what a sports car should be, a real driver's machine.
PP Video Productions hope that you've enjoyed the Porsche 911 experience. These are just a few titles available in our range. Please contact this address for further details.